Beyond the Ego, an inquiry into authentic living. Introduction. What if the greatest barrier to living fully isn't in the external world, but within our own minds? Have you ever wondered why certain patterns keep repeating in your life, despite your best efforts to change them? The human journey unfolds within invisible barriers we've unknowingly constructed through what psychologists call the ego. What would it mean to recognize these barriers not as fixed realities, but as constructs that can be examined, and transcended? In exploring the ego, we're not seeking to eliminate an essential aspect of our psychology, but rather to develop a conscious relationship with it. What possibilities might open up if we could see beyond the ego's carefully constructed reality? How might our relationships, creative expression, and sense of purpose transform? Part 1. Understanding the ego. The formation of the ego. How does a newborn infant, experiencing the world as a seamless flow of sensations, eventually develop a sense of separate self? What messages did you receive from family, education, culture about who you were supposed to be? How might these early influences still be operating in your identity today? Through our experiences, particularly those involving praise, criticism, reward, and punishment, we construct beliefs about ourselves and the world. I am good at this, but not that. This behavior earns approval. That one brings rejection. These situations are safe. Those are threatening. How might your family dynamics, cultural conditioning, or even traumatic events have contributed to shaping your self-concept? In what ways has the ego oversimplified complex realities into black and white thinking? The ego as protective mechanism. What is the ego truly trying to accomplish with its constant activity? Could it be functioning as a sophisticated protection system, scanning not just for physical dangers, but for psychological threats? Consider what the ego might be attempting to protect you from. Rejection or abandonment, failure or inadequacy, uncertainty or loss of control, meaninglessness or insignificance. What defensive strategies has your ego developed? Have you constructed a fortress of perfectionism, adopted preemptive pessimism, built walls of judgment? How conscious are you of these protective mechanisms operating in your daily life? The shadow of safety. How might the ego's well-intended protective instincts become the very barriers that prevent us from living fully? Where in your life might the ego be whispering, "Stay where it's safe. Don't risk, don't change"? Ask yourself, when do I withhold my authentic thoughts and feelings, presenting only what I believe will be accepted? Where am I resisting change, clinging to familiar patterns even when they no longer serve me? How might I be selectively perceiving information that reinforces my existing beliefs? While these mechanisms may provide temporary security, how might they be restricting your capacity for growth, joy, and connection? Part 2. The ego's impact on our lives. Living in the subconscious. How much of your daily life unfolds through conscious choice and how much through automatic patterns? What would it mean to discover that many of your reactions, judgments, and decisions arise not from present moment awareness, but from conditioned responses? Consider how subconscious living might manifest in your experience. Do you respond to emotional triggers with the same patterns without questioning whether these responses still serve you? What unconscious biases might be influencing your perceptions and decisions? How often do you notice your mind generating interpretations without your conscious direction? In living primarily from the subconscious, could we be becoming spectators rather than active participants in our own lives? Fear as the driving force. What lies at the heart of the ego's protective mechanisms? Could it be that fear creates a restrictive filter through which we perceive opportunities and possibilities? When fear is your primary motivator, how might you make decisions based on what could go wrong, rather than what might go right? Consider how fear might be influencing various aspects of your life. In your career, have you chosen stability over passion? In your relationships, Do you withhold emotional intimacy to protect yourself? In your creative expression, do you censor your authentic voice? How does the ego convince you that these fear-based choices are rational and necessary? Yet in prioritizing safety above all else, what experiences that would bring depth and joy might you be sacrificing? The constructed reality. What if the world you experience isn't an objective phenomenon but a subjective interpretation filtered through your beliefs and expectations? Could the ego be both projector and screen, casting your internal assumptions onto the external world and then perceiving them as independent facts? Consider this circular system. 1. You hold a belief, e.g., people can't be trusted. 2. This belief shapes how you interpret others' behavior. 3. Your interpretation influences how you act toward others. 4. Your actions affect how others respond to you. 5. Others' responses then confirm your original belief. How might these mechanisms create invisible barriers that limit your capacity to perceive new possibilities? In what ways has the ego's world become a hall of mirrors, reflecting back its own assumptions disguised as objective reality? Part 3. Awakening to awareness. The power of conscious observation. What if the journey beyond the ego's limitations begins with a simple yet profound shift? What might happen if you develop the capacity to observe your thoughts and emotions without immediately identifying with them? How might this create space between the observer, your awareness, and the observed, the content of your mind? What freedom might emerge in recognizing that you are not your thoughts or emotions, but the awareness in which they arise? What would it take to develop this witnessing capacity? How might bringing attention fully to the present moment change your relationship with thought? What would it mean to notice thoughts and feelings without labeling them as good or bad? How might approaching your internal experience with curiosity reveal new insights? Could these moments of clarity be the beginnings of awakening, glimpses of a more spacious awareness beyond the constraints of the conditioned mind? Questioning our thoughts. Once you can observe your thoughts rather than be captured by them, what possibilities open up for questioning their validity? When a thought arises, particularly one that generates distress, what might happen if you pause to ask, is this thought objectively true or just an interpretation? What evidence might contradict this assumption? Is this thought helpful or beneficial to me? Where did I learn this belief? Is it truly mine? How might this process of inquiry help you discern between thoughts that reflect reality and those that merely perpetuate habitual patterns? Through questioning, how might you loosen the grip of limiting beliefs that have shaped your experiences for years? Recognizing ego patterns. As awareness deepens, what specific patterns might you recognize through which the ego maintains its influence? Consider common examples. The inner critic. How does the voice that constantly finds fault affect your sense of worth? The comparer. How does measuring yourself against others create feelings of superiority or inadequacy? The controller. How does the need to manage outcomes react when situations are unpredictable? The approval seeker. How has basing your self-worth on others' validation shaped your choices? The victim. When do you perceive events as happening to you, overlooking your agency? What might change if you could recognize these patterns when they arise? How would it feel to respond consciously rather than react automatically? The practice of presence. Could awakening be an ongoing practice of returning to presence whenever you notice you've been captured by the mind's narratives? What might this practice involve? How might attention to physical sensations anchor you in the present moment? How could using the breath as a focus point help quiet mental chatter? What happens when you fully experience sensory input rather than dwelling in abstract thought? How might these practices strengthen your capacity to remain present even during challenges? What truth might the consistent return to presence eventually reveal? Could your essential nature be this awareness itself, not the temporary content that passes through it? Part 4. Transcending limitations. Transforming negative thought patterns. As you recognize the ego's negative thought patterns, how might you actively transform them? What approaches could facilitate this transformation? When negative thoughts arise, how might examining the evidence reveal the ego's tendency to cherry-pick information? How might generating different interpretations expand your perspective beyond worst-case scenarios? What would happen if you offered yourself the same kindness you would extend to a friend? Is this process about forced positivity or about recognizing how the ego's negative bias distorts perception and consciously choosing more accurate ways of interpreting experiences? Aligning behavior with values. As awareness expands, what gaps might you discover between your automatic behaviors and your deeper values? What would it take to bridge this gap? Have you clarified what genuinely matters to you beyond the ego's concern with status or approval? What might change if you paused before reacting to consider what response would align with your deeper principles? How might using everyday interactions as opportunities to practice living from your values build congruence? Each time you choose a value-aligned response over an ego-driven reaction, how does this strengthen your capacity for authentic living? Expanding beyond barriers. How does the ego maintain its influence by establishing comfortable boundaries around what you consider possible? What barriers might be limiting your experience? What fixed beliefs about who I am might be restricting your growth? What assumptions about others' expectations shape your choices? What self-imposed limits on what you can learn or achieve might you be accepting? What might happen if you began expanding beyond these barriers through experimenting with possibility with curiosity rather than attachment to outcomes? Embracing productive discomfort at the edge of your comfort zone. Questioning identity beliefs through new experiences. As you practice expanding beyond these barriers, might you discover that many limitations were constructed by the ego's fear of the unknown? Creating conscious reality. What if the most empowering realization is that if perception creates reality, then changing perception changes reality? How might you participate in creating a more conscious reality? What would it mean to take responsibility for interpretation, recognizing that you can choose how you respond to events? How might moving from "this is happening to me" to "this is happening and I can respond consciously" change your relationship with challenges? What qualities, gratitude, compassion, curiosity, might you intentionally cultivate? Through these practices, how might you begin to experience reality not as a fixed condition, but as a dynamic interplay between awareness and experience? Part 5. Living Beyond Ego, Balancing Ego and Awareness. Is the journey about eliminating the ego entirely or developing a balanced relationship? How does a healthy ego provide important functions while remaining in service to awareness? How might you utilize the organizing capacities of the ego while remaining conscious of its tendency toward excessive control? What would it mean to maintain a sense of self that provides continuity while remaining open to growth and new possibilities? In this balanced state, how might the ego become a tool rather than your master? Authentic connection. How might transcending ego limitations transform your capacity for connection with others? How could authentic connection manifest in your interactions? What happens when you bring full presence to another person rather than being lost in projections? How does genuinely listening without preparing your response change communication? What becomes possible when you're willing to be seen authentically rather than presenting a carefully managed image? How might your relationships transform from strategic exchanges to genuine encounters between authentic beings? Embracing uncertainty and change. How does the ego crave certainty and resist change? As you transcend these limitations, what different relationship with uncertainty becomes possible? What would it mean to approach unfamiliar situations with curiosity rather than anxiety? How might building confidence in your capacity to respond reduce the need to control outcomes? What stability might you find in awareness itself while circumstances continually change? How might the inevitable changes that once triggered fear become doorways to new discoveries about yourself and the world? Purposeful living. What possibilities lie beyond the ego's concern with security and status? Could there be a deeper sense of purpose as an expression of your authentic nature? How might contributing to something larger than personal gain transform your relationship with work? What activities engage you because they are inherently meaningful rather than for external reward? How might making decisions from a clear sense of what matters most change your life's direction? Does this purposeful orientation necessarily change what you do, or might it transform how and why you do it? Conclusion. The ongoing journey. What if the journey beyond ego isn't a linear path but a spiral of ongoing awakening? How might moments of clear awareness alternate with periods when the ego's patterns reassert themselves? What changes over time? Is it the elimination of ego patterns or your relationship with these patterns? How might you develop greater speed in recognizing patterns and more compassion for your struggles? As you continue this practice, what truths might become increasingly clear? That you are not your thoughts, but the awareness in which they arise. That many limitations exist only in the mind and dissolve when met with attention. That beneath the ego's fears lies a natural capacity for connection, creativity, and joy. That your essential nature is already whole, despite the ego's persistent sense of inadequacy. Do these realizations exempt you from life's challenges? Or do they allow you to meet experiences from a place of greater freedom? How might each moment offer a fresh opportunity to choose awareness over unconscious reaction? What new possibilities await beyond the familiar confines of the ego's constructed reality? And what would it mean to begin exploring them today?